Got it. So let me share my screen. Good morning, good evening, everybody. Radhe Radhe. Very warm welcome to today's edition of Daily Wisdom from Bhagavad Gita. Let's get started by invoking the blessings of God and Guru like we always do. I'll share my screen and we will get started. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Give me a second. Enable content. All right. So we'll get started with our opening prayers. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsvachanuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. All right, Radha Radhe, good morning, good evening, everyone. So let's get started. We are on Shloka 2.72 and to supplement this shloka, we have picked up a couple of other ones. So like yesterday, we are going to go through each one of these. Maybe we'll pick up a few hands for each and then get into the deeper discussion. The topic that we have chosen for today, what exactly is God realization, right? What does it mean? And we'll try to uncover some of the concepts around it as our scriptures tell us. So let's get started. I'm going to recite the shloka and then you're welcome to follow along. Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati Sthitva Syamanta Kalepi Brahma Nirvanam Ichchati. Okay, do we have any volunteers?
Radhe Radhe, Anita ji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe.
Anita ji.
Radhe Radhe, Nitin ji.
Radhe Radhe.
Esha Brahmi Stitih Partha Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati Stitavyavastyanamantakaalepi Brahma Nirvanamucchati.
Wonderful.
You, Radhe Radhe.
Thank you very much, Anita ji. Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe, Surya Prakash ji.
Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe, Surya Prakash ji.
Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nainam Prapya Vimushyati Stitva Syama Takalepi Brahma Nirvana Mruchati.
Wonderful. Very nice, Surya Prakash ji. Maybe we can pick up one more hand and then we move to the next couple of shlokas.
Radhe Radhe, Sandhya ji.
Radhe Radhe, Sandhya.
Radhe Radhe. Isha Brahmi Sthitihi Partha Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati Sthitva Syamanta Kalepi Brahma Nirvanam Richati.
Wonderful. Very nice. Then we'll move on to the next couple of shlokas. So this one, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, part such is the state of an enlightened soul that having attained it, one is never again deluded. So this is the state of realization, God realization, where he's saying then one is never again deluded. So ignorance cannot overcome you once you are in that state. Being established in this consciousness, even at the hour of death, one is liberated from the cycle of life and death and reaches the supreme abode of God. Now let's pick up another shloka around that. It says, Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yah prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra sanshaya. All right, do we have any volunteers for this?
Radhe Radhe Payal ji.
Radhe
राधे
Payal ji.
राधे अन्तकाले च मामेव स्मरन् मुक्त्वा कालेवरं या प्राप्यति सा मद्भावं यतीनास्त्र संशय.
Very
Radhe
nice,
Radhe.
Payal ji. Radhe Radhe. Thank you.
Radhe Radhe Riya ji.
राधे राधे
Radhe Radhe.
अन्तकाले च माम् एव स्मरन् मुक्त्वा कलेवरम् य प्रयाति समद्भावम् याति नस्त्यत्र संशयः.
Very
राधे
nice, Riya
राधे.
ji. Radhe Radhe. So let me tell the meaning of it, and then we move to the next one that few of you can recite it as well who haven't gotten an opportunity. This says, Lord Krishna, those who relinquish the body while remembering me at the moment of death will come to me. There is certainly no doubt about this. Now, if we are not able to remember God, then what does he say? He says, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kanteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. All right, we can take the remaining hands on this one.
Radhe Radhe Ramesh ji.
Radhe Radhe Ramesh ji.
Yeah, Radhe Radhe. Yam yam vapismaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tantame vaiti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha.
Wonderful, very nice, Ramesh ji, as always. Okay, maybe a few more hands and then we get started.
Radhe Radhe Sumesh ji.
Radhe Ramesh ji.
राधे राधे राहुल जी यम यम वापि स्मरन् भावं त्यजत्यन्ते कलेवरं तं तमेवेति कौन्तेय सदा तद्भाव भावितः. राधे
Wonderful,
राधे.
Sumesh ji. Radhe Radhe. Okay, let's take a few more hands and then we move on.
Radhe
Two
Radhe
more
Shyam
hands.
Sundar के भक्त जी.
राधे राधे
Radhe Radhe Shyam ji.
यम यम वापि स्मरन् भावं त्यजत्यन्ते कलेवरं तं तमेवेति कौन्तेय सदा तद्भावभावितः. राधे राधे.
Radhe Radhe Shyam ji. Very nice. Last but not the least, Sam ji.
Radhe Radhe. Yam yam bhakti smaran bhavam tyajtyante kalevaram tam tam eti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha. Radhe Radhe.
Very nice. Radhe Radhe. Okay, I see one more hand. We'll freeze it now. The last one. Yes, Ashutosh ji, please go ahead.
Radhe
We
Radhe.
can't hear you properly, Ashutosh ji. No, we are not able to. You may want to fix your audio in the meantime. So let's get started with our session for today. So this shloka, the last one that we had picked up, it says, whatever one remembers upon giving up the body at the time of death, O son of Kunti, one attains that state, being always absorbed in such contemplation. It's pretty logical if you think about it, right? Whatever we contemplate upon, wherever our mind dwells upon, is something that means that's where its attachment is. That's where it thinks that that is an unfulfilled desire and that is going to give me happiness. And whatever we have predominantly spent our life on or our thoughts on is usually stuff that will get stuck in our head at the time of our death. And it's the biggest, the strongest animal that gets out of the farm once the gates are opened. Similarly, and that thought will occupy our mind And based on that, we are given another birth. Okay, whichever. So human birth is dictated by that lasting thought, and even otherwise, maybe some other species also, right? For like Jat Bharat, there's a beautiful story in Bhagavatam which talks about attachment. So this was a saintly person who had acquired a lot of spiritual merit, but towards the later part of his life, he came across a dove who was about to give a baby, and she was being chased by a lion or something like that. She delivered a baby and ran away. And he took care of the baby, of baby deer, and so much so that his mind started getting attached to that baby deer, and he would fend for her, get the baby food and all that stuff. And when he was about to leave his life years, his mind naturally went towards that baby deer. That, okay, who's going to take care of it once I'm gone? We all have that kind of worries, right? For our kids or our son or daughter or somebody in our life, who's going to take care of that after I'm gone? What's going to happen? This and that. Now, based on that, he had to become a deer in next life. But because he had sufficient spiritual merit, he understood, and he used to roam around the ashrams of sages and stuff like that. And the next time when he got a human life, he realized his mistake, that all these attachments, no matter what it is, will basically bring me back into this world. And a person of his caliber, because his mind went to a deer, he had to repeat as a deer. So if we have pets and our mind goes to that, wherever they go in next yoni, you have to become that. Okay, so be careful about it. Where what kind of attachment you are building. It's a this is how it works. Basically, God is like an indulgent father, right? Universe is like a kalpa vriksh. You desire, all right, I'll let you fulfill it so that you decide for yourself, did that desire give you happiness or not? God says, until you are clear that you need me, I'm willing to wait. Okay, you take your short gamble at Maya and Mike relations. Keep on playing on that gamble for as long as you're not convinced. Once you're convinced, then I'll wait for you. That's how essentially the principle works. Now let's get started. This concept can be often a bit confusing or hazy. So we'll try to understand this point. What does basically God realization mean? What are the possibilities after God realization? Now one may say, why do I need God realization? Right? It's a fair point for anything. Why are you even telling me God realization? I'm happy in this material world, and I don't feel a need. Why should I even be investing in spirituality or to even understand Bhagavad Gita or any of the scriptural principles? And forget about God realization. I think there is happiness in this world. I have enjoyed that with my family, with my friends, whatever little it has been. That is what life is all about, right? If you present that argument, let's look at it basically. What is it that we get? And then it's a trade-off. Are we okay on what we are subjected to as part of our lives? Or do we want something better than that? Right? The call is always ours. God is not forcing us to saying that, you know what, I absolutely want you in my abode. He's not saying that. It's a choice we have to make. So let's move on and try to understand this concept a little more. Before that, let's start with a beautiful lecture from Swamiji, who's going to set the tone for what we are going to discuss in a little more detail today. So let's hear at this beautiful lecture and get started. Let me know if you're able to hear the audio.
Lord desires.
Okay, great.
The Lord desires his little parts to grow in divine virtue and become perfect like himself. We revere saints of the past like Surdas, Tulsidas, Mirabai, Tukaram, Guru Nanak, Kabir and Narsi Mehta. We too must strive to become like them, transcendental in virtue and qualities, for that is true spirituality. Swami Vivekananda put it so well when he said, these great prophets were not unique. They were human as you and I, and they had attained super consciousness. And you and I can do the same. They worked on giving up those desires using the Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of the intellect, cultivating and practicing all this knowledge, and they achieved the goal. That Brahmi Sthiti, or state of liberation, can be achieved even while living in the world. So when that state arises, what happens to our soul? Sri Krishna now answers.
This is the last verse of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. Sloka chant.
Never again. And says Arjun, when the soul reaches that point, Sri Krishna is developing the knowledge. So here his emphasis is on giving up desires. When he comes to the 9th chapter, etc., his emphasis will be on developing the desire for God, which is devotion, bhakti. So here he's talking about, he's just mentioned the virtues of not desiring. So he says, Arjun, when the soul perfects that art, when the soul attains mastery over this desire and is able to eliminate them totally, that soul reaches the Brahmi Sthiti, the state of enlightenment. So right now, we are under the bondage of Maya, the material energy. So this material energy has bound us all in ignorance. In that ignorance, we are thinking, I am the body. This world is mine. This world will be mine. I will not leave it ever. This person is mine. That person is mine. And in this consciousness, we are doing karmas. And the karmas are binding us. And this bondage is of many lifetimes. So there is the karmas binding us from endless lifetimes. There is the avidya, ignorance. There are the 3 gunas of Maya, sattva gun, rajogun, tamogun, mode of goodness, passion, ignorance. They are the pancha doshas of the intellect, the pancha koshas of the body. So many bonds of the material energy have got the soul in its mesh. So then what happens? Sri Krishna had mentioned it a few verses ago, that when you attach your mind to me, you will receive divine grace. So he says, Arjun, when that grace will descend, by that grace, you will get not just freedom from desires, not that, not dukha nivritti, atyantik dukha nivritti, the cause Maya, that itself will be cut asunder. In other words, you are bound by Maya, God will cut that bondage and release you from the bondage of Maya. Maya will still exist, the world will still exist. Prisoners get released from the prison still exists, but they are freed from it. So the world will still exist, you will get released. In other words, you may still be alive, you may still be in the world, you may still be living, but Maya will no longer bind you. That is called Jivan Mukt Avastha. Liberated even while in the body. He who reaches the Jivan Mukt Avastha, now Maya is no longer binding him or her. That person has been released. So there are no karmas there. There is none of the avidya or the ignorance there. That person, Swairam Charanti Munayo Pinanahyamanas, is walking, working in the world totally free. For the sake, for the benefit of others. And then when that person's prarabdha is finished, that person leaves the body and goes to the divine abode of God, never to come back again. So that Brahmi Sthiti, or state of liberation, can be achieved even while living in the world. Arjun, you can do it. Prahlad did it. Dhruv did it. Ambarish did it. Prithu did it. They were all big and powerful kings. They had bigger kingdoms than your Indraprastha and Hastinapur. But they worked on giving up those desires using the Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of the intellect, cultivating and practicing all this knowledge, and they achieved the goal, Arjun. You can also do the same. So when that state arises, the Vedas say, Vidyate hridaya granthis chidyante sarva sanchaya kshiyante chasya karmani tasmin drishte paravare. Hridaya granthis, the bondage in the heart is cut asunder. All the doubts are dispelled because of the torchlight of knowledge. Kshiyante chasya karmani, that sanchit stockpile of karmas of endless lifetime is burnt. Tasmin drishte paravare. One is united with God, seated in the state of God realization. That state of God realization is what Sri Krishna says, Esha Brahmi Sthiti. The state of being seated in Brahma, being enlightened. Shri Krishna Chandra Bhagwan ki, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jagat Guru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj ki.
All right. Hope you enjoyed this short lecture. Let's move on. We'll build on from what Swamiji has explained and get into a deeper discussion today. Barkha, you had a question? See your hand raised.
Radhe Radhe Barkha ji.
Okay, you'll have to unmute yourself. Yes, Barkha.
Yeah, you are
Okay.
not audible, Barkha
We
ji.
can park that question for the end once we conclude our discussion, because we're not able to hear Barkha.
Haji do not have any question. I think she raised hand by mistake, it seems.
Okay, no worries. That's okay. So basically, and now we'll address the question: what happens when the God realization happen, or what happens if we don't do God realization? So let's see the things that we are subjected to. Hopefully, it will help us see the trials and tribulations of Maya in perspective, even if we have not woken up to it, because we've had a good prarabdha so far. Doesn't mean any one of us is immune to it. It doesn't mean that we have to get scared about it or have a pessimistic approach, so to say, but this is a fact of life. Okay, it's good to live in awareness rather than burying our head in sand like an ostrich and wishing away that everything is fine, hunky dory. Okay, so what happens? Let's look at some of the things that we are subjected to. Material body, it is subjected to three doshas, three defects of materially conditioned state. Okay, we'll talk about those three doshas. Then three modes of three gunas, the basically the sattva, rajas, and tamas. The three doshas are doshas which are brought in by the kapha, vat, pitta, because of which the diseases come. The panchakoshas, we'll talk about those as well, 5 sheets of material energy that cover us, and 5 defects of the material intellect. We'll talk about those as well. Okay, so this material body, if you look at it, is after God realization. When you do that, all of this gets vanished. You don't have to deal with any of it. Till you are not God realized, you just have to deal with it. Now let's look at more part of it. So after God realization, you will end up getting divine love, divine bliss, and divine knowledge. Okay, the Satchit, the Vibhu Sat, Vibhu Chit, Vibhu Anand of God is something that becomes your Dai Bhak. That means your true inheritance. Like you claim an inheritance from your father, similarly, God is all too happy to give you your true inheritance. We are the only limiting factor why God is not able to give us at this point. And when we do that God realization, first of all, we are situated in perfect love, perfect bliss, and perfect knowledge. That's the first thing we have to understand. Now, moving on, what are some of these panchakleshas that Swamiji spoke about? The panchakleshas that we are subjected to. So these are the 5 gentlemen. Look at, okay, these kleshas are, it starts with avidya, ignorance. Right? Even in the Vedant Sutra, this Vedavyasji, the first thing he has said is the ajnanam evasya mool karanam. It all starts with ignorance. Because we don't have proper understanding, knowledge, it just keeps on compounding. The effect keeps on compounding and manifesting in a lot of different ways. What are the manifestations of ignorance? The misconception about our true reality, right? What is temporary and unreal, we think of it as pure or something that what our identity is. And we are not able to distinguish between what is pleasurable, what is beneficial, false, distorted representation of false, and being further away from the reality. And because of which what happens is asmita. That is the first one. That is I amness. We identify ourselves with the ego. Ego is nothing but an interface between our soul and the body. Okay, and we start identifying ourselves as with the identifications of our body, like I'm poor, I'm rich, I'm so and so, I'm an IT engineer, I'm a manager, I'm this, I'm that. Okay, that's false projection starts happening. That is asmita. Then happens this rag, attachment. That brings satisfaction to ourselves, right? We do the bodily extensions, we go after pleasurable experiences, and we keep on desiring, although we suffer, but we continue to do that even though we are not getting that perfect happiness again and again. And this endless cycle continues, that attachment continues with the false promise of attaining that perfect happiness, which is anyway not there in this world. And then the repulsion, dvesh. In every relationship, in this worldly relationships, you cannot but fall into the trap of these two, rag and dvesh. Either you would like something or you would hate somebody. There are people who would you like to have, or you enjoy their company. That is the rag aspect of it. And then the dvesh aspect of it, I want to avoid these people. This is something that you fall into. So negative attachment is called dvesh. Or we have a propensity to avoid unpleasurable or inconvenient things. So that is another one. And last but not the least, abhinivesh, will to live. This is the most universal klesha. In fact, the biggest fear everybody has, the fear of death. Because we are part of God, there's an inherent, our soul identifies itself with the body, and it thinks when the body ceases to exist, my identity will also cease to exist. And this fear is there with everyone. The fear of death. In fact, this fear of death is considered the biggest fear people have, humans have. The second one is public speaking, of course, but the first one is the fear of death. And it stems from the fact that we are eternal. And the will to continue to exist comes in from our inherent nature. And because we are thinking that we are limited by this body, we don't have a conception that we are a soul. That fear is always deep rooted in our heads. So these are the panchakleshas that we have to deal with. All of us have to deal with for as long as we are under the influence of Maya. We are Maya Dhin. Only after we become God realized, we are beyond these panchakleshas. Till that time, we have to deal with it. Nobody is immune from it. Okay. If somebody is thinking that by becoming a scholar, they have conquered ignorance, that's not a fact. Even their scriptural understanding would be limited until they have become God realized or they have come in contact with a true saint. That will also be limited. So all these things they'll have to deal with. This is Panchaklesh. Then we spoke about Trikarma, Sanchit, Prarabdha, and Kriyaman. I'll not get into too much of detail today, but just briefly, Sanchit is like the stockpile of fruits that we have not yet born. It's like, see, we spoke about this concept that we have existed since the time God has existed, since eternity. And because of that, we have already accumulated a stockpile of karmas, which is like a big infinite ocean. And even if we exhaust infinite minus infinite is still infinite. So basically, it's an immense ocean or stockpile of our sanchit karma, which already exists. Out of that, a drop is picked by God and given to us in a particular human birth, which is called prarabdha. And kriyaman is something that you do in this life, right? Those actions that you do, purusharth, the ability to do purusharth is called kriyaman. So we have to deal with this trikarma. We cannot escape that, okay? Because we have a stockpile of sanchit karma. So until that is burnt, you'll have to continue here. So trikarma is something you have to deal with. Now with God realization, what happens is, like in 18.6, Lord Krishna says, once you perfect your surrender, I'm going to burn the stockpile of your karmas. It's a huge mercy from God's side. Because left on us, we cannot burn it. Let's say you do karam yoga, perfect karam yoga in this life. Still, you have just exhausted a drop. First of all, that is not possible. We would have accumulated some binding karma, so poured something back into the ocean already. But let's say hypothetically, you have burnt one drop in the ocean. How many drops would it take? How many lifetimes would it take you to do that? Statistically impossible. So God also understands that. He said, you continue doing your karma, increase the spirit of surrender. The day you are 100% surrender, I'm going to burn off all your karmas. Sarva papebhyo. I'm going to just burn it off for you. So that is trikarma. You can escape trikarma only after God realization, not before that. Then tritap. Tritap is something nobody can escape. Adi bhautik, adi devik, and adhyatmik. Adi bhautik, material suffering by other humans, right? We know that, okay, what happened? A leopard came, like in Himachal. It will start attacking humans. Somebody becomes a man-eater. Other insects come. Somebody gets bitten by a snake, scorpion. They are the other bhutas that bring upon us. We have to deal with it. Adi devik also we have to deal with. Tornadoes come. Now we are stuck in a snowstorm here in West Coast. Flights are getting cancelled. Floods come. Earthquakes come. People lose life. Material loss. Collateral damage happens. Nobody can escape that. Okay. And then adhyatmik happens. And the adi bhautik also includes people get run over by cars, right? Accident can happen on roads. All those things. Nobody is immune to that. And adhyatmik has mental diseases we all suffer from, right? Anger, passion, greed, ego, and other physical diseases. Can anybody claim that they have risen above trikarma, tritap, or the other thing? Nobody can. So God realization is going to take you beyond these. You are no longer subject to these. Now, Panchakoshas will not get into too much of detail, but these are the Panchakoshas. They get, right? Pranamay Kosha, Manomay, Vijnanamay, Anandamay, and Annamay Kosh. All these koshas, the gross body or the sheet that you have, the cage, so to say, which is given to us, a rental property that we inhabit for a limited period of time, which is used to sustain our life here so that we can put it to good use. That also is caged, right? We have to deal with or maintain it properly, because these koshas, when there is an imbalance, diseases happen, right? Manas rogs can happen. Anandamay koshas, then your stress levels get up and stuff like that. So the pancha koshas are also there that we have to deal with. And now let's get into this concept of, we said that how is moksha and some of the other things different from each other. So I've tried to put it graphically. And that's where we are going to have a bit of a discussion today on this concept, because it's a deep concept. And at the same time, it's important for us to understand it in good clarity before we get into the further possibilities around it. So let's say there's a graph, okay? There's a line from, bottom to top, bottom being the less happiness or the misery aspect of it, and top being, so let's say this is dukh, misery, okay? One of the definitions of this material world is called ashashvatam and dukhalaya. So it's ideally, from a devotee standpoint, there is neither happiness nor dukh in this world. Okay. However, for materially conditioned souls who are not yet surrendered to God, or who are not work in progress towards surrendering to God, it is actually a place of misery, because Maya will always give a whack. Maya will never cease to disappoint you, because if it is fulfilling your desires in the way you want, it is not truly serving the purpose of this creation. Okay. So from that sense, on one end, I have picked up dukh, the misery aspect of it. And on the other side, we have the neutral. Let's say the misery is finished, which is called dukh nivritti. Okay. This is the neutral. So one aspect of it is, you come from misery to a position, state of no misery. Okay. Misery has been eradicated. Okay, that is one state. It's just like, think of it that you are suffering from fever and you take crocin or Tylenol, your fever is over. Okay, so there's a misery and now misery is finished. This is one state. However, our scriptures say there's a state beyond that as well. What is that? Let's look at it. You can go beyond, which is called Ananda Prapti. Okay, so you came from negative to zero, but now you are getting into the positive part of it. You're actually getting some bliss also. So you became well after taking the medicine, but now you are able to perform and do things also, right? It's a higher state than that. So from that sense, let's map it to some of the stuff that we want to talk about. Dukh, this is the material world. Okay. Now on God realization, or let's say this is moksha, where you have actually finished off your dukh. Dukh nivritti has happened. This is also called Brahmanand. Okay, this is where your spirituality, the first boot camp of spirituality, very first state. Moksha is where Bhagavad Gita ends, right? Basically, you are beyond Maya in this state, and your dukh has ceased to exist. Okay, that is the state. It is also called Brahmanand, and it's not an ordinary Anand. It's a very high level of it, right? And for a lot of traditions, moksha is the end state, end goal of life. However, if you have come in contact with a Rasik saint, they would tell you that that is fine. There is a bigger bliss possible as well, which is called God realization, which is also called Premanand. Okay, it goes even beyond moksha. Okay, that is the third stage. Now, if you look at it, in material world, we do karma, okay, which is born out of Sat. You do karma. If you continue to do karma, good, bad, neutral, good, bad mostly, we do the mixed bag of karma, you get material world. That is simply called karmas. We'll talk more about this in depth in chapter 3. Simply doing karma is going to give you material world only. You cannot go past the material world if you simply do karma. Okay. Now, beyond that, if you are actually doing Karam Yoga, because you have understood the deeper philosophy that you have to offer it to God, and you perfect your surrender, then you get to the next state, which is the Chitta Shakti, with which Gyan comes. And then if you go even beyond that, which we are going to talk about, then you get Anand, which is basically through Bhakti. Okay, Bhakti is the only way to get that. Regardless, whichever path you choose, Karam needs to have Bhakti, then only you can do Karam Yoga. Gyan needs to have Bhakti, then only you can perfect your Gyan Yoga. And Bhakti in itself is Nirashrit. It alone can sustain itself. Okay. But the key point here is that the Bhakti is the one which will lead you to Premanand, not any other thing. So without Bhakti, you cannot get to the Premanand aspect or the true bliss of God. And if you make Premanand as your goal, then automatically Dukh Nivritti has happened. So it's like this, right? That story of Satyavati was there. Yamaraj came and said, I need to take your husband. And she took a boon from Yamaraj that I need to get, I don't know, 100 sons or however many. Because she got that boon, her husband had to be kept alive by Yamdut. So similarly, if you make Anand Prapti as your goal, Dukh Nivritti has automatically happened. So you don't have to strive for that. That means Moksha is under Premanand. If you go for Premanand or the divine bliss of God, then moksha is a byproduct of it. You don't really have to strive for it. Okay. And the possibilities of Premanand is something, it's a topic in itself that we will delve deeper into tomorrow. Is basically something that we are going to talk a little bit more about tomorrow. But the point here is, it is something which is bigger than the Brahmanand. A Brahma Gyani or a Gyan aspect will take you at best to moksha. But when you actually strive for the divine bliss of God, you get moksha automatically. It's not that moksha is the ultimate thing. Okay, moksha is nothing but a byproduct of attaining divine bliss. Now, some people may say moksha is the ultimate aim, which is fine. That's where Bhagavad Gita ends. But our scriptures tell us there are bigger possibilities as well. And those are the ones we are going to talk about tomorrow, where you talk about the spiritual abodes of God. Any questions so far before we go any further on this concept? Because it's an important concept and it's not so easily understood. And even after hearing this, I'm sure you'll have questions when we get into some of the subsequent sessions, because you'll forget it. But this is an important concept, and Maharajji, Swamiji have explained it so beautifully, and I've tried to illustrate it, a little graphically today, so that you can remember this concept, and hopefully it becomes a little more clear. Yes, Nileshji, you had a question.
Radhe Radhe, Nitinji.
Radhe Radhe.
So just what do you mean by moksha? Is that a liberation from the birth and death?
Yes. Moksha is something, when you say moksha, all the things that I spoke about today, right? The previous tridosh, tritap, panchaklesh, you are beyond that. Okay. It's not that you are back in material, you are beyond that. So you have already gone past Maya. That is what moksha means. That means you are no longer subject to life and birth cycle at that point.
But you are still, it's not a union with the God.
It is a union with the God. However, I'll talk more about it tomorrow. It is basically merging with God. Okay. Oneness with God. So let me try to give you a simple analogy. It's like there is a honeybee. Okay. There's a honeybee. And then there is a honey. So honeybee has become the honey itself. Okay. In Premanand, the honeybee is able to taste the honey as well. So it's a oneness with God. So wherever you have heard this concept of merging with God, becoming one with God, is the concept of moksha, where na rahega bans, na bajegi bansuri. In bhakti, they call it spiritual suicide. Okay, it's a pretty strong term. Okay, only a Rasik Seth can use that, and people who are devotees, they'll be able to appreciate it. They say that it's better to continue to come back as human, because at least you can go for the top prize that we'll talk about tomorrow. But mokshas, you have forfeited that opportunity, right? You have become one, and it's like you have forfeited that bigger opportunity for a higher bliss of becoming, being able to serve God and devour the nectar of his devotional bliss or the divine love. That opportunity is forfeited when you go for moksha, basically. But moksha, you are beyond Maya. It's not an ordinary accomplishment, right? You are in a state of enlightenment, and you are beyond tridosh, tritap, trikarma, panchakosh, pretty much everything at that point.
So if you attain moksha, and you are not subject to the birth and the death cycle, then you still have an opportunity to go to the next level?
Very rarely. I mean, it's a good question. If you have had sanskars or bhakti in the past, right, and maybe one of the saints you have come in contact with, I don't know what is the algorithm, and if they grace you, then you may do Krishna bhakti or Saguna Sakar bhakti and get the next level of. But normally, Maharajji says it can happen for few rare souls. But typically, you have forfeited that opportunity. See, if you are on a Gyan Marg, if you have been practicing your spirituality for so many human births as Aham Brahmasmi, or I am God, or Nirakar aspect of God, or merging with the effulgence, those sanskars are so deepened. For you, it's not easy to pick up the sanskars of bhakti just like that. You will think this Krishna bhakti or bhakti of the deity or the form is people for the dim intellect. It is the foot in the door. The higher is the Nirakar. Okay, those kind of concepts will be very dominant in your head. And even after listening to Rasika, you will not agree. Your mind will say, no. Okay, what I've gotten is right. But some saints, with God's grace, it can happen. Like there was a disciple of Shankaracharya, Madhusudan Saraswati, I believe. He was in Nirakar, this Gyan Marg, and then he got Krishna Bhakti. It happened in his lifetime only. So he was fortunate enough. But I don't know who will be fortunate enough, or how does it get orchestrated by God. I don't know that. So to your question, typically no. Once you are merged with the God, that opportunity is forfeited. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. Maybe they can come across a saint who will say, you know what, you are in perpetual bliss of moksha, but there is a better possibility if you're willing to do Krishna Bhakti and make serving him as your goal. Maybe that is a possibility and it has happened. Hope I answered your question. I know these are deeper topics. Okay, any other question on this? It's a very interesting and an important topic. You know, when I was going through, my journey, these topics I used to find it very intriguing. And then I had a lot of Vedantis, people who have been brought up in Shankaracharya tradition, Gyanmarg tradition, who have been studying Vedas since last 50 years. They would bring in their perspective. So I have spent a lot of time on this topic and spoken to Swamiji and heard Maharajji's lectures in depth on this topic. It's a very interesting topic and a very profound, deep topic. And trust me, unless you come in contact with a Rasik saint, they don't even have a way to give you Krishna Bhakti. Only a Rasik saint who's of that level, who have attained Krishna Bhakti himself, has the power to give you that. Right? Radha Krishna Bhakti is not so, it's very durlabh. So for whatever reason, if your intellect has settled for that, it's a huge gain. Doesn't happen so easily. In fact, your guru itself will tell you that I can take you to this level, but I cannot give you Krishna Bhakti. And if you are getting exposure to Brajras, you have hit a jackpot, right? Because for an ordinary soul, getting up to Kunjaras is the highest bliss that we are going to talk about tomorrow. But not every saint can give you that unless they are from that category. Okay. So these are deeper topics for sure, but yes, I've just put moksha in perspective because people think moksha is the ultimate thing. And Maharajji has very clearly said, yes, moksha is not an ordinary achievement. However, it is still a partial truth. And that is what we are going to talk about tomorrow. What is the absolute truth? Until we have understood something in its complete entirety, it is still not 100%. So, for example, if you have experienced sun rays, have you understood sun in entirety? Not yet. Or let's say you have touched sun's surface. Have you understood sun in entirety? No. Only when you've gone to the core, probably you understand the sun completely, right? Or experience the core. So that is how deep it goes. And that's where our scriptures tell us the depths of bhakti, which we're going to touch upon tomorrow. Okay, let's take a few more hands. By the way, we have Jan 14th and 15th, Jagat Gurutam Devas is coming. I think something related to that. So look out for that. We will be putting out a form for you to participate in. There will be a bhajan competition. Also some online interactive segment that I think we will be planning for. So look out for that. I'll share more details with you as soon as they become available. And just mark your calendars for that, January 14th and 15th. Okay, let's take a few more questions now.
Can we take a question in the chat? I think there is a question from Priyaji. She asked that, can you explain Brahman? Is it a level after Premanand? I think she is talking about Brahmanand and she is asking.
Brahmanand is a level. Brahmanand is basically nothing but the bliss of moksha. Premanand is a bliss of God. So the way it has been equated is Brahmanand, let's say if somebody has an ocean of Brahmanand, okay, our scriptures tell us if you drop a needle in that and take the needle out, and whatever is the trace remaining of that needle, that much Premanand, if you experience, you will give up the entire ocean of Brahmanand. That means the bliss of moksha is insipid in front of the bliss of divine love of God, the Premanand of God. But it requires a higher eligibility. Moksha, as I'll talk about, it sounds a little absurd, is also selfish, where you're saying, my misery should end. It is a selfish spiritual quest. Premanand, you get only when you are completely selfless. Serving God is your only motive and desire, nothing else. So when you attain complete selflessness, that's when you get the highest prize of God. Not that I want to get, rid of this misery of this world and beyond this misery and just merge with you. That is also a selfish desire. So, but Brahmanand is lower than Premanand, just to answer your question, Priyaji.
Radhe Radhe Urvi, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe Urvi.
Radhe Radhe. Can we go back to the Tritak slide once?
Tritap. Oh, you like Tritaps? Okay, let me go back to that. All right, here's you go.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask that the Adhyatmic Tritap we're talking about, so mental, we cannot get rid of these, but to some extent, we can like control these with knowledge, right? So the extent to which we get the Adhyatmic Tritap is somewhat in our hands as well because of the free will. So similarly, other human beings also have a free will. So is the Adi Bhautik Tritap also fixed for us, or it depends on people? Like, is it
No,
fixed by
Adi.
God that this is?
No, Adi Bhautik is something we'll have to deal with, right? Because it's an ecosystem where we are. So if I'm going to stay in Arizona, humans are going to stay in Arizona, they'll have to put pest control, right, to build their houses. And when that pest control is built, then they are also going to fight back, right? The scorpions that can survive that. So point being that you'll continue to get challenged by other human beings and by other insects who are fighting for their livelihood as well in the places where you have encroached. So all that stuff continues. So Adi Bhautik is the very design of this nature where you have to deal with other. If you are walking through a forest, and you come across a hungry lion, he's not going to spare you. He's not going to get a pop because he ate you. But that is how they are driven. They are driven by instincts. They have to say, protect themselves. They have to feed themselves. So Adi Bhautik is something other human beings will bring upon you because their self-interest, because we are not yet become completely satisfied, right? So everybody is operating with their self-interest. And whenever there is a conflict in your self-interest with somebody else, those kind of challenges will come, whether it's your relations, with your parents, with your boss, all that stuff will be brought upon by other people. You will continue to get challenged. But the diseases aspect, right, to some extent, we do have a control over it, right? If we live responsibly, we don't smoke, we don't drink, we have a healthy lifestyle, we do yoga, so we can increase our longevity. But finally, they will catch up with us, right? Like my grandfather, he led a very healthy life at a very healthy place. So he died at 102. Finally, some disease caught hold of him, even though he increased his longevity, but eventually some disease will catch us because that is how the machinery is designed, right? Heart and lung, you cannot extend infinitely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe. Yes.
Yeah, Radhe Radhe. Can you go to the last slide, like Premanand and Premanand, that slide?
Premanand, okay, sure.
So where does our total surrender 6 principles come here?
Yeah, so total surrender principle will come here from the spiritual milestones. Your spiritual milestone starts from, for even to attain moksha, you have to do surrender. So it's a very simple principle. When you have to go beyond Maya, you have to surrender. So even if you are Gyan Yogi, finally you have to surrender for you to get moksha. And in bhakti anyway, you have to surrender, right? So those principles would be needed for you to go beyond Maya.
So what exactly is the difference between the Premanand and Brahmanand? It's only the bhakti which plays the role, because you said again the Premanand end result, it's this moksha is a byproduct.
Byproduct means you reject moksha, you don't go for moksha. You have already attained whatever a person who's in moksha has got, but you have gotten much better than that. Okay, so this is what it means, right? So so it's like if you have somebody will say my aim in life is to remove poverty, and somebody says my aim in life is to become rich. Now the person who has become rich has already eliminated poverty. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, right. Thank you, Radhe Radhe.
Yeah. Yes, a few more hands.
Before we move ahead, can I make some announcements?
Sure, Rahul, please go ahead, and then we can complete our discussion.
The most important announcement is right now we have the Bhakti Sadhana Shivir. That is one part where you can still join the live lectures of Swamiji. Apart from that, we have the New Year Eve celebration and New Year celebration from RKT Dallas. You can watch it live from the comfort of your home or go to the temple. So it will be on the December 31st from 10 p.m. till midnight, and on January 1 from 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. All
Wonderful.
the details are in the chat, and I can again share the link. So it will be blissful kirtans, meditation, Swamiji's lecture, and Mahaprasad. So that is an important thing.
Sure. Yeah, please do avail that opportunity. It's a great way to start your new year. Immersing yourself in blissful kirtans. Okay,
those are the
great.
major announcements for the weekend, so we can take some more.
Thank you, Rahul. So we have 5 more minutes before Swamiji's lecture starts, so we can take few more. I think Prakashji has raised some.
Can I take one
Prakashji could...
new person, Snehal? Yeah, maybe.
Sure.
Radhe Radhe, Snehalji.
Radhe Radhe. My question is, what is Buddhi Yoga?
Buddhi Yoga, we will get into that. Buddhi Yoga is basically harnessing the power of our intellect. Okay. We'll talk about, we have spoken about this concept. Maybe I'll bring it again in one of our sessions, the difference between our man and buddhi. Okay, although it is synonymously used in our scriptures. So for example, Snehalji, our mind tells us to do something, right? But there's a higher faculty within our mind which tells us, you know what, although like in Hindi we say man kar raha hai to do that, but your buddhi will say don't do it because it's not good for you, right? For example, your mind might say, let's have an extra scoop of ice cream, but your buddhi will say, no, it's not good for my health. Your mind says, keep sleeping, but your buddhi will say, no, I have to catch a flight. So Krishna says, buddhi, how to harness your buddhi with proper knowledge so that you can utilize it for your own benefit. That is essentially what Buddhi Yoga is. And we'll talk about it in more detail. We don't know that ability that we have. When we arm our intellect or buddhi with the proper knowledge, we can do wonderful things. And that is essentially what Buddhi Yoga is, as we will discuss in our subsequent chapters.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Radhe Radhe, Sandhya ji, did you want to add something for these announcements?
No, I think it was the Jan 1st is Bhakti Divas at the temple or Radha Krishna temple. So yeah.
Okay, we've already spoken about that.
Radhe Radhe, Prakash ji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe, Nitinji.
Radhe Radhe.
So again, the question is on moksha and these things, since my mind is material, so still I'm not able to. So you said moksha is beyond Maya, right? And we also learned that moksha is, Maya can be conquered only with the God's grace.
Right.
So which means that when you are in moksha, that means you already have a God's grace.
That's right. It's a very technical question, very true. So even though a jnani looks at light, effulgence, or a Nirakar Brahm, but Nirakar Brahm does not have the ability to grace. So I asked this question to Swamiji, when without God's grace, you cannot conquer Maya, then how can they even attain moksha? So he said, you know what? Finally, they also have to surrender to Saguna Sakar. And then they attain moksha. So even to go there, so on their self-efforts alone, they can conquer Maya, a Vidya Maya aspect of it. The Vidya Maya aspect of it cannot be conquered until they surrender to Saguna Sakar. You can ask that to Swamiji again. It's a great question. And that's how they even attain moksha. Now you would say, if they are actually doing Saguna Sakar, then why not Bhakti? Why not Premanand? Probably they don't have the sanskar. Their goal was always to merge. So maybe that's how it goes about it. But it's a very technical question. That's right. They still have to rely on grace. They cannot do it on their self-effort.
Okay. And just one follow-up question, sorry. So is there any separate thing that we will do for moksha compared to God realization, or it will be the same effort?
No, it's like the fundamental approach in which you are approaching spirituality will vary. Right? For moksha, your approach would be to merge with God always. So there are people who worship God as a Brahma Jyoti or Nirakar Brahma, or as a light, or as an effulgence. So then your practice becomes centered around that. People who do devotion, they are doing the Saguna Sakar, they are actually playing with Krishna in their mind, or Ram Bhagwan, or Shiva, whichever their Aradhya is, right? Ishtadev is. So the building blocks are different. It changes. It's not the same actually. You speak to a jnani, they find it very difficult to do Rup Dhyan or even to engage in a worship of a deity, because they think it's people who are with dim intellect who don't understand who they do it. So they're intellectually not convinced to do that way. So your building blocks of your devotion will really vary, and it's not easy to reverse them once you are in advanced stages. So if you look at it from an effort standpoint, yes, you are changing the way you are approaching this whole thing. On one side, you are saying, I have the ability to attain God on my self-effort alone. Another one, you are saying, no, God, I am Nirbal and I rely on your grace because I cannot do anything. So even that switch has to happen in your head, right? In devotion and in Gyan. So it is a little different in both the way you are approaching your spirituality. I hope that answers your question. Yes, Surendraji, you wanted to add something? Maybe one more after that.
Thank you, Nitinji. Radhe Radhe. Brahmanandi has to forego Brahmanand once he is in moksha stage. There remains
no, Brahmanand is moksha, bliss of moksha only. They are in perpetual bliss at that moment. They don't have to forego. Brahmanand means the bliss of moksha only.
Deprived of bhakti, deprived of bhakti. He doesn't have to have bhakti.
They don't get an opportunity to serve God, let me put it that way, because they have become one with God at that moment. They don't get that opportunity to be in his spiritual abode or to participate in his pastimes or to serve him in his spiritual abode. So once moksha is done, they are a done deal at that point. They're also in beyond Maya at that point. But serving God, enjoying his pastimes, all that stuff, that opportunity is forfeited forever. That is why I said it's called spiritual suicide, right? Which is a pretty strong term.
Thank you, Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe. Yes, Swatiji. And Vinisha ji had raised her hand as well. If you're there, we could take one more. We'll wrap it up in 2 more minutes.
Yeah, Radhe Radhe, Swatiji.
Yeah, Radhe Radhe. I just wanted to see first slide, whatever you showed, no, Nitinji. Just take a screenshot of first. Yeah, that's it.
All right, no worries. Yes, Vinisha ji, you can ask your question in the meantime. Is this the slide you wanted to see, Panchiklesh?
Yes, this same one. Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Yes, Vinisha ji.
Radhe Radhe.
Last.
So if we have contemplated on God quite fairly in our life, but are still unable to remember God at the time of death, will we still attain our human form?
See, it's a good question. I don't know. Depends on Mr. Chitragupta ji, who maintains a ledger in balance for you. Okay. Now, this is a very good question. How soon we get what can we do so that we attain a back-to-back human birth? I asked this question to Swamiji. Is there a formula for us to get a back-to-back human birth? And he said he had asked this question to Maharajji as well. So basically, typically, if you have spent, he said that if you have spent more than 50% of your life in making spirituality or God realization your priority, then there is an opportunity for you to get a back-to-back. Otherwise, you may have to wait it out. How long of a wait? Are you going to go in 8.4 million and come back again? Or maybe part of it? Or maybe after a couple of lifetimes? I don't know. Only God has that algorithm. But for us to increase our chances, we should put our human life to best use and do as much, cleaning of our heart and getting closer to God as much as possible, so that God says, all right, this guy was very sincere, really made it a priority. So let me give him another scholarship, back-to-back human birth, and give him very conducive circumstances, family and situations, so that he can continue on this journey. But there's no formula as such for that, other than putting in our best foot forward in this direction.
Thank you.
Did I answer? All right. Now, Vinisha, where are you joining us from, Vinisha ji?
I'm joining from Illinois.
Okay. Good to hear from you. I'd love to hear more from you. Okay, with that, I know we have Swamiji's lecture. It might have already started, so we have overshot a little bit. Wish you a very wonderful day and rest of your evening ahead. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We'll continue on the Premanand aspect of it a little more in depth tomorrow, so that you get a little more depth into what are the possibilities of bliss around that and the absolute truth as such. So Radhe Radhe, thank you from my side, and please fill out the feedback tracker if you have not already. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Good night, good day.